the big question is, what is Putin offering and what does Trump want for a ceasefire? And what did Witkoff agree with Putin on a few days ago?
At about 3 o'clock this morning, UK time, Israel's Security Cabinet approved a plan to secure the full occupation of Gaza. It's a controversial escalation in the nearly 2-year war. We got a sense this was coming. Speaking to Fox News last night, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said Israel intended to take military control of the territory, but had no wish to govern it.
The only way that you're going to have a different future is to get rid of this neo-Nazi army. The Hamas are monsters. The way they massacred, raped, beheaded our people, our men and women, burned our babies. And they are really cruel to their own people, because when we try to take them away from the combat zones, they shoot them. They want people to be civilian casualties.
Here to steer us through the US president's efforts to secure some sort of peace is Stephen Erlanger, the New York Times chief diplomatic correspondent. Stephen, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell us what Netanyahu has done in the last couple of hours, why, and what impact it might have.
Well, as far as we understand, he's had this big battle with his own military leaders. What they've decided upon was something gradual. I think it's going to take several weeks, even months, to do even what they suggest, which is to first take over all of Gaza City, at least what's left of Gaza City, and move the people in there out, and then move down to Khan Yunis. I do think a lot of this is meant as pressure on Hamas to come to terms. If you remember, it's the long negotiations in Qatar have been back and forth. And the Americans have finally said, enough of this, let's just do a one and all and done deal. All the hostages in return for Hamas disarming. Hamas has rejected that, but this may be more pressure on them to do it. When Netanyahu says Israel doesn't want to govern Gaza, I mean, that's sort of obvious, and yet they'll be completely responsible for it. His intention, I guess, he says so, is to hand over eventually a demilitarized, mostly destroyed Gaza to a Palestinian technocratic group of leaders who are not affiliated with the Palestinian Authority, in the hope that the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia will help them, fund them, and help rebuild Gaza. But I think this is, at the moment feels like a fantasy. So we'll see in the next few weeks how serious the Israelis are. The army needs to prepare, and also whether this does help push Hamas, as its own supporters are pushing it outside Gaza, to go back into negotiations seriously and to give up control over the enclave.
The bigger overriding question is what action better facilitates long-term peace. Does this have any part of that?
Well, long-term peace, what is that? I mean, long-term peace is quiet. I mean, there's not going to be a Palestinian-Israeli settlement, not under this Israeli government or under this Palestinian Authority, probably. Peace, so if peace is quiet, it means a Gaza that is controlled by the Israelis around its security, where Hamas has disappeared or got its leadership, what's left has gotten on boats and gone, and some sort of control over the civilian population of Gaza is established. But there's a war in the West Bank also, don't forget. I mean, the Israeli army has been very active there. Partly it's because of the settlers, to be sure, but partly the Israeli army has been after Palestinian militants as they see them inside the West Bank and pulling up these big settlements, refugee settlements in Jenin and Tulkarm. So that continues. So, that's not peace either.
At the same time, you have France, Canada, Britain laying out, in some cases conditions, in some cases not, for how they would recognise a Palestinian state next month. How does this complicate that?
I don't think it means anything at all. to be honest. I mean, 147 countries already recognize Palestine as a state. It's very hard to recognize something that doesn't exist. You don't know its boundaries, you don't know its governance, you don't know anything about it. The Germans, the Americans, others say you have to have a Palestinian state that emerges out of negotiations between the two parties, i.e. Israel and Palestine, that isn't just kind of recognized from the sky. Now, the French and the British argue this is leverage on Israel to end the war in Gaza, but and we have to do something, and we have to do something because of domestic political pressure. But as a actual, real something that matters to the conflict, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's absolutely without merit.
At the same time, I mentioned Donald Trump, who claims to have solved 5 wars trying to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, also trying to secure a ceasefire in Ukraine. Today was quite an important day because Donald Trump had given President Putin an ultimatum to say there will be significant sort of financial penalties in forms of increased tariffs if you don't secure a ceasefire with Ukraine by today. Things have shifted since then, haven't they? And the New York Times were the first to report that there was going to be potentially this meeting between President Putin and President Trump. How many steps have been made there towards progress to peace? Because some of the criticism maybe of what's happened in the last 24 hours or so is suggesting, has Putin been a bit rewarded here? He's being sort of re-welcomed back to the diplomatic table.
Well, Putin has kind of bought time for himself. I think that's really what I see is happening. I think this deadline disappears, except for poor India, which, Trump's angry at India anyway. He claims he's putting big new tariffs on India because of its purchases of oil from Russia. He hasn't done this for China, but China already is facing 50% tariffs.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. But I think for Putin, it just puts off this more economic pressure on him. He wants a bilateral meeting with Trump without Zelensky. Trump's willing to give him that. So to some degree, you're right. But you can't end something without talking to people. So I don't see talking to Putin is such a big issue. The big question is, what is Putin offering? And what does Trump want for a ceasefire? And what did Witkoff agree with Putin on a few days ago? You hear various reports. We don't really know. I think part of it is about perhaps both sides pulling back troops from a certain area for a ceasefire. How long a ceasefire would last, we don't know. They're very easy to break. I don't think Putin has given up on his main aims. In fact, I'm sure he hasn't, which is Ukraine as a kind of vassal state, never inside NATO, probably not inside the EU, demilitarized or with only a small military, and more like Belarus than like Poland.
We will see how the day plays out. Thank you so much, as ever. It's been such a pleasure. Stephen Erlanger, the New York Times Chief Diplomatic Correspondent.